Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, praise be to Eywa, it is episode 99, where we are talking Avatar: Fire and Ash. I am so excited for today's episode. After last week's Watcher Watch Back, talking about Avatar... Not even 30 seconds in and we're interrupted by my Amazon device. Like I was saying, last week was so much fun talking about Avatar 1 and 2, and it really got me in the mood for Avatar Fire and Ash. So last night's screening, IMAX 3D, freshly after watching the first two and really talking about kind of my newfound love, or my even higher love and appreciation for these films leading into the big finale. Great experience. So today is going to be a blast talking about Avatar Fire and Ash. But first, I hope you are all doing well. This is, of course, the final episode before Christmas. So happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everybody, whatever you celebrate. Happy time off from work if you're lucky enough to get time off like myself. It's a very much needed week. I'm very excited to just chill out with my family, hang out. Also, new YouTube video will be coming soon. I don't know if it'll be out this week or next week, maybe before New Year's Eve. I'll figure it out, but it's my 2025 winners and losers in TV and movies. It's going to be a fun little video where I get into some people that I think won this year and some people that I think are a little bit of losers. Also, for today, timestamps below. Obviously, it's, a brand new movie, Avatar Fire and Ash. It's the big finale to this Avatar trilogy that James Cameron has spent almost 20 years on, so there's going to be spoilers. As for next week's episode 100, might be a few hours late. It might come out Monday night instead of Monday right at midnight, so just beware because I will be recording a little bit late after I see Marty Supreme and I'm traveling, so it's going to be difficult. But as for today, we're going to have the news section, non-spoilers, spoilers, what else I watched, where there's tons of stuff to talk about, a lot of Christmas stuff to talk about in that section. But for now, let's jump into the news. Our first piece of news comes from the DCU, where James Gunn has officially confirmed in a tweet saying, in our worldwide search for Brainiac in Man of Tomorrow, Lars Eidinger rose to the top. Welcome to the DCU, Lars. Now, if you don't know who this Lars Eidinger guy is, he's a German actor, but he's also a rapper, and he looks creepy. He's got that long German villain hair. He's very tall. I think he's like 6'3", 6'4", but this is an actual confirmation that Brainiac is the villain. We haven't actually had that yet. We've only had little teasers that gonna be the major villain, not just for Man of Tomorrow, but going forward in the DCU. I think there's gonna be multiple movies with Brainiac, so he looks like a really great pick. Someone asked James Gunn, like, what was it that convinced you Lars is the right pick? And James Gunn said his audition. So it's fun that we're getting another DCU actor selected just on their audition, and not the fact that they are super famous. Like, they are really looking for people that fit these roles and are proving themselves in the audition process, whether it's Clayface, whether it's Millie Alcock, whether it's David Cornsweet as Superman. Like, a lot of the DCU roles so far have gone to a little bit lesser known actors, I would say. Millie Alcock, obviously Game of Thrones or House of Dragons or whatever, big deal, but she's not like a worldwide phenomenon superstar with people having posters of her in her bedroom or their bedrooms. So this is very exciting as well. I think he only has like 3 really popular acting credits, not even 3 sort of popular acting credits. He was in a Netflix show called All the Lights We Cannot See, or We Can See, or something like that. Very exciting. I'm pumped to have a villain as well in Man of Tomorrow that we haven't really seen before. I think it's nice that we're moving on to someone else instead of, oh, we're gonna do General Zod again, or we're just gonna keep like copying and pasting the same villains over and over. Lex Luthor is just the villain again. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Lex Luthor, but I'm excited for a big baddie like Brainiac, who is a huge character in the comics, a lot of the cartoons and animated stuff. Brainiac is a very important character, whether it's Injustice or whatever it might be. So it's about frickin' time that we're actually going to get him in live action as his fully formed self, because James Gunn is not afraid to embrace the comic booky nature of characters. I mean, he did it with Superman, he did it with the Guardians, kind of, although he changed a lot about the Guardians, or kind of changed the way the Guardians were going forward. So this is a great choice. He looks creepy. I'm excited for him to have his big green bald head like Peter Capaldi did as the Thinker in the Suicide Squad. Lots of stuff going forward with the DCU. I mean, we got Lanterns last week or the week before, but they've officially confirmed it's coming out after Supergirl. The Supergirl trailer came out. I think it looks pretty fun, and this is great as well. It's lots of good news for DCU fans. But let's move into our next story. Metacritic has officially put out their top 15 worst movies of 2025. In first, it's War of the Worlds. Second is Playdate. Third is Gunslingers. 4 is Alarum. 5 is Brideheart. 6, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. 7, Shadow Force. 8, The Strangers Chapter 2. 9, Hurry Up Tomorrow. 10, The Electric State. 11, Juliet and Romeo. 12, Smurfs. 13, Modi. 14, Regretting You. And 15, Old Guy. That is a brutal list. I would totally agree that War of the Worlds is absolutely the worst. I'm happy that they put The Electric State on there. Some people are like afraid to criticize The Electric State because it's the big bad Netflix, but that movie absolutely sucked. And there has been some stinkers this year. I know we talk about how great of a year it has actually been for movies in the end. When you kind of look back, we've had One Battle, we've had Sentimental Value, If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, tons of great movies that we've had, Sinners, whatever it might be, or movies that a lot of people have enjoyed, like Superman or Weapons or 28 Years Later. But there's been some like generationally bad movies. Like I think War of the Worlds is genuinely one of the worst movies we've had in a little while. I watched it when I got back from vacation, and I've never seen a full movie acted out in Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams because it's mind-bogglingly bad, and it was such a shocking way to return to watching movies after vacation is War of the Worlds. What do I have to catch up on? And it's the worst movie of the year. I think on my Letterboxd I have it in last, but I might be mistaken because I don't know, I have some vendettas against, The Electric State. Yeah, it's in last. In 116th place I have War of the Worlds and then The Electric State, and then Kinda Pregnant and Hurry Up Tomorrow. I'm surprised Flight Risk wasn't on this list, with Mark Wahlberg, Mel Gibson directed film with like Topher Grace. That was, oh my god, that was so bad, that movie. I absolutely hated it, but that's a pretty good list. I feel bad for anyone that has seen all of these movies this year, especially if you did pay money for all of them. I almost saw Brideheart and I almost saw Shadow Force, but I'm very happy I didn't see either of those. Juliet and Romeo as well as Modi I have never heard of, but Regretting You, again, almost saw it in theaters, decided not to. I've avoided 2 Colleen Hoover film adaptations, so very happy that I'm avoiding these bullets. And Playdate is the Alan Ritchson Kevin James movie on Amazon Prime that just looks absolutely god awful. So I'm very happy I've dodged some major, landmines this year. But what about Five Nights at Freddy's? I mean, it seems like the fans of the games absolutely love these, but the critics don't really connect with it, which is interesting. Like, are they just full fan servicey, or is it just that fans are happy to see just what they want, or just the average game stuff that doesn't even look that spectacular or whatever? I don't know what it is. I haven't seen them. I have very limited knowledge about Five Nights at Freddy's, but all I know is very popular movies. Like the second one had a budget of $30 million and it's already crossed $200 million. So it's made its money back in very quick fashion. The box office has been very good the last few weeks. I mean, Zootopia's already cracked like 1.2 billion, I think, and Avatar we're going to talk about, but it's doing very well. I think it's going to end up on a good number. But Five Nights at Freddy's is also kind of a dark horse right now at the box office and doing well with fans. I mean, the fact that it's quadrupled what it cost, not including, I would say, marketing and stuff like that, but it's definitely been profitable. So there's no doubt I think they are going to do a third one. But what a bad list of the worst 15 movies of the year. A few of mine are on here, like Hurry Up Tomorrow. Like I said, that was absolutely terrible, but I'm happy I avoided a few of the stinkers. On to our next story. Well, we have our first casting news for The White Lotus Season 4. Alexander Ludwig and AJ Michalka, a very interesting last name, have been cast in The White Lotus Season 4. So Alexander Ludwig, I was like, how do I know this guy? He has such a familiar face. And then I showed a photo to my girlfriend and she's like, oh, that's an annoying guy from Hunger Games. He's one of like the bullies that comes after Peeta and Katniss in the first Hunger Games movie, the blonde-haired guy. Oh my god, I have not seen him in anything in forever. That was crazy to see him. I've never seen any of her acting credits, so it's fun that we're starting to get little trickles of Season 4. We know it is set in France. That has been pretty much confirmed, and just this week we saw Mike White in the Survivor 50 preview, which was pretty crazy that like we got a Survivor 50 preview, which we'll talk about in the What Else I Watched segment. But I'm excited to see what big stars are going to be in Season 4 of The White Lotus. If it's not Nicole Kidman, I don't want it. it. I think she is so perfectly fit for the White Lotus, as well as Olivia Colman. I think she would be so good. I have a little bit of a wish list. Like, I think there are some stars that are just so perfectly fit for this crazy universe where batshit stuff happens. And it seems like most of the internet is in agreement that Nicole Kidman's kind of the perfect fit. But it's fun that we're getting this stuff. We're not going to get, White Lotus season 4 for a very long time. Probably not till 2027, I would say, early 2027. No doubt it'll get a bunch of awards because every season has racked up a bunch of nominations. I mean, even season 3, which was not critically the best received season, or even the fans, a lot of them, it wasn't their favorite season. Shitload of nominations in the acting categories. But our next story, James Cameron says sci-fi films almost never get recognized at the Oscars. Quote, Denis Villeneuve made these 2 magnificent Dune films. Apparently these films made themselves because he wasn't considered as a director. He also had another quote saying, when a reporter asked him, like, what do you think of the Academy Awards? He's like, well, I can make movies that get tons of nominations, or I could make movies that people see. And I just love how much of a tear James Cameron is on in the Avatar press run. Like, someone asked him about Avatar 4, and he's like, would you ask a woman that's in labor, would you ask her about her next child or getting pregnant again? Just hilarious answers. And he is making a really good point. Sci-fi kind of doesn't get recognition. I mean, Blade Runner 2049 didn't get tons of recognition. I mean, both Dune films largely under-nominated or under-awarded, I would say. And Denis Villeneuve not nominated for either of them. It's kind of insulting because they're 2 of the most like grand scale films that we've had in the 2020s. And yet there's just zero recognition for them. And the Academy is just so blindsided or just refuses to give him any credit. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. James Cameron, obviously, he's got a bunch of nominations. He's won Best Director, and he knows what it's like to be recognized by the Academy. So I think he actually has a really good grasp on things, and he knows what it's like since he made Avatar, how much less those movies sort of get public recognition or public nominations and stuff like that. Like, it's got visual effects. The first one did get like 8 nominations, I want to say, but The Way of Water, I feel like it was less. I hope Fire and Ash does get a Best Picture nomination. We'll have to see. As for James Cameron, I doubt they're going to nominate him for Best Director. It's just been too competitive of a year, and I think the 5 directors so far kind of pick themselves in a lot of ways. But our final story of the day, Warner Brothers is starting a new contemporary film label led by former Neon employees. The label will develop 2 to 3 films per year that are lower budgeted global theatrical releases with innovative marketing campaigns. I'm not sure what the innovative marketing campaigns thing is supposed to mean, but it's fascinating that Warner Brothers is still like creating new things and it's starting new labels when they're about to be bought pretty much. Like, they're a few years away from being sold off. I know they are still their own entity, but Netflix is going to have control of everything in a little while, as much as they want to say, oh no, we're going to remain separate. We'll remain separate, blah, blah, blah. I'm not believing a word of what they say. I like that it is the 3 Neon employees that are coming over, or former Neon employees that are coming over. Neon does great promotional stuff for their films. Like, for No Other Choice, they made a public post saying we're inviting top Fortune 500 CEOs or whatever to come watch our films, No Other Choice. And hilarious marketing campaign when you know what the film is about. But it's fun that Warner Brothers is still pushing for new things. I know it's not David Zaslav doing any of this, but they had a great year at the box office. They're still, releasing physical media. They still care about art preservation and film preservation, all this stuff. They're still a very artistic and historic company. And the fact that they are opening a new label like this shows they're not completely out of the race. So I don't know. I mean, my dream scenario is nobody buys Warner Brothers and instead David Zaslav gets the boot out of the company and someone takes over. But obviously I'm living in a fantasy. Not an insane amount of news to report this week, but the big event, of course, is Avatar Fire and Ash. Once again, timestamps below if you don't want anything spoiled for you. Be aware there's a non-spoiler and spoiler section, but let's do it. Let's talk Avatar Fire and Ash. Avatar Fire and Ash is a 2025 action fantasy film coming in at 3 hours, 17 minutes. It is the longest of the franchise, but ironically kind of has amazing pacing, and I thought it flew by the quickest of the 3 that I've watched very recently. It is directed and written by James Cameron on a budget of $400 million, making it one of the most expensive films of all time. Box office, it is already off to a very strong global start with $350 $150 million confirmed for its opening weekend. Reviews, the lowest of the franchise. Reviews are currently 7.5 on IMDb, 68% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 91% audience score, 3.7 Letterboxd average with a 4-star mode. So it's, it's still pretty positive, but a little bit mixed on the Rotten Tomatoes critic side of things. But Letterboxd, I think it's still doing quite well. But the synopsis for Avatar: Fire and Ash: in the wake of the devastating war against the RDA and the loss of their eldest son, Jake Sully and Neytiri face a new threat on Pandora, the Ash People, a violent and power-hungry Na'vi tribe led by the ruthless Varang. Jake's family must fight for their survival and the future of Pandora in a conflict that pushes them to their emotional and physical limits. The film stars, of course, Sam Worthington as Jake, Zoe Saldana as Neytiri, Sigourney Weaver as Kiri, Stephen Lang as Quaritch, Una Chaplin as Varang, Jack Champion as Spider, Kate Winslet as Ronald, Cliff Curtis as Tonowari, Joel David Moore as Norm, CCH Pounder as Moat, Edie Falco as General Ardmore, Brendan Cowell as Scoresby, Jermaine Clement as Dr. Garvin, Giovanni Ribisi as Selfridge, David Thewlis as Paylak. I knew it was him. I was like, dude, I recognize this guy from Harry Potter or something. I didn't even recognize him though, because he is, an Avatar. Britton Dalton as Loak, Trinity Jolis as Bliss, Jamie Flatters as Nitayam, Bailey Bass as Sierra, and a whole bunch of others. But here we go. My initial thoughts on Avatar: Fire and Ash, one of the biggest movies of the year. I thought this majorly kicked ass, even if it feels somewhat recycled or part two-ish. Because if you don't know, Avatar: Fire and Ash, Avatar: The Way of Water were originally one story. James Cameron split them into two. You can definitely feel that, but I had so much fun. Let's start with my audience reaction. I was in a sold-out Saturday night, 6:30 p.m. Avatar: Fire and Ash in IMAX 3D at Scotiabank Theater, like the most popular theater in the city, I guess you could say. Theater owner or the CEO dude of whatever came in and introduced the movie before, said, oh, James Cameron was here a couple days ago for the Canadian premiere, which I sadly did not get tickets to, which made me very sad, and said this is the best laser projector that we have in the city, in the country, blah, 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 all this stuff. But packed audience. There was some annoying chatter, like the people beside me made a couple comments, and then one time one of them spoke and I made eye contact with them, and then they didn't talk for the rest of the movie. And around me there was someone that was chatting with the person beside them every once in a while, but mostly everybody was locked in. There were people giggling in certain parts that I was like, I don't think that's supposed to be funny, but they were laughing at the silliness of the story, or they weren't taking it seriously, I guess you could say. I don't know, the stuff that I didn't find funny, I was like, yeah, that's what it is. But this one dude was giggling and clapping, and it was really annoying. But before the film actually started, we got the prologue for the Odyssey and a teaser for Avengers Doomsday. One of them was absolutely astonishing. My heart was racing, couldn't believe what I was watching. The other one, could not believe what I was watching in the opposite way and how bad and stupid it was. You'll have to check out my social media to figure out which one is which, but I'm not going to talk about that here. Otherwise, it was fun seeing it in a packed theater. Someone left halfway through. I don't know if they got a headache from the 3D or whatever, but I had no issues with that. We'll talk about it in a sec. But yeah, really great theater experience. Let's begin with the performances. Of course, Sam Worthington as Jake Sully. I think it is commonly accepted now that Sam Worthington's Australian accent is going to slip through in all these movies, but that's just kind of the way he talks now. But I want to give him major credit, Sam Worthington. I think this is his best performance as Jake Sully. I thought he was so good in this. He had me in the palm of his hand as this grieving, broken down father who is just trying to get his family to survive and help them. He was great here. And same with Zoe Saldana. Is it her best performance? Possibly. I think she has the most to do in this film, which we'll talk about, but really, really, really good, both of them, giving such broken and vulnerable and just impactful performances that I loved. Sigourney Weaver as Kiri still sounds like a 70-year-old woman playing a teenager, but I really enjoyed her character a lot, and it didn't bother me as much this time. I was just so lost in the story, and that's going to be, I think, a little bit of a common theme today, is issues that didn't really bother me because I was so lost in the action and the heart and the soul of it all. Stephen Lang as Quaritch, like I said last week in the Watcher Watchback, I think he's just so underrated in these movies. He's so good as Quaritch. This one, even more, I think this is his best performance. He's so much fun. He's sort of in this relationship with Varang, which we'll talk about, and hilarious to see how it goes down. And Una Chaplin as Varang, actually our new villain, I thought she's a wonderful addition. I haven't seen her in anything. I think she's in Game of Thrones. She is so good. She's kind of creepy, jolly all over the place in this, and I just loved it. I think the rest of the cast is also really good in this. I think all the kids are really great. The youngest kid, Took or whatever, so adorable. Love that kid. Everybody is really good in this movie. I thought the cast really nailed it in a kind of farewell type of film. But as for the direction, look, Big Jim does it again, because the story, like, yes, there's beats that feel similar. He really leaves it on a high note, or like this huge swing with crazy shit happening. The emotional beats really, really work for me here. They're big swings as well. There's some moments that we'll talk about later in spoilers. I couldn't believe they were doing it because it just was so dark, and it really blew me away. And I think he adds new characters that are interesting, like Varang and the Ash people. In Avatar: The Way of Water, we got the Water people as this fun introduction, but in this one, we get an evil new tribe that we have to root against, and we're used to cheering for the Na'vi people. So it's very fun how James Cameron is playing with the expectations of this franchise that we've had before and flipping it on itself. And I think as well, as a director, we don't really talk about the physical spacing of these films, how it's all motion capture and they're filming it on a soundstage. But I think this film in particular, Fire and Ash, the physical spacing of the environment really works. I felt like I knew where I was the entire time. In the forest, it never feels like we're getting lost when there's a chase sequence or anything like that. It really, really, really works here. And I think James Cameron only grows as a director working within this medium, and it's a lot of fun. And as for shooting in high frame rate, I really spoke about last week the video game feel of the first two movies, and I forgot that The Way of Water also used high frame rate, whereas last night, Fire and Ash, there's so much high frame rate, and I really liked it. It feels like a video game cutscene on the PlayStation 5, because most PlayStation 5 video games do run in high frame rate when they're in like story mode or whatever, and it felt like that, the really smooth feel to it all, and you can notice sort of the gliding feel of everybody, or sort of the swaying feel of everyone, and it just looks so gorgeous in the high frame rate, and it feels like a video game again. Especially the final battle of this movie, there's a sky fight that I won't talk about until spoilers, felt like a video game. I'm not even kidding. I was like, this feels like I'm watching a playthrough of something, in the nicest way possible though. I think the visuals really differentiate it from a video game. And something we didn't really get to talk about last week is how does it play in 3D, because this movie, I got to see it in 3D because I'm in theaters. I loved it. I felt like the whole movie was really carrying a purpose with it in 3D, and it's constantly delivering on the fact that this really works in 3D. Like, there's a hallucinogenic moment, or a hallucination scene, I should say, that I thought was so much fun in 3D. The opening of the film is a flying sequence that I was like, oh, this is fucking phenomenal, and I absolutely loved. So a lot of people hate 3D. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I gotta say, when it comes to Avatar, I really do enjoy the 3D formula, or the 3D delivery, and it really works. The only other movie I've seen in 3D in the last probably 10 years was Wicked, and I absolutely hated my 3D experience of that, but it really works here. As for the visual effects, I've already sort of danced around it or talked around it. It really works. Is it the best looking movie of the three? I would say so, but since it's kind of shot back to back with The Way of Water, kind of on par with each other, but there is one sequence in the sky when they're flying with the traders or whatever they're called, and I thought that all looked gorgeous, and it's maybe like the peak moments of this entire franchise, as well as the final act of this film in particular. It's just kind of mind-blowing how they get the textures so right, whether it's, flowing water, or people's skin, how it looks in certain shades of sunlight, or during the eclipse that we get on Pandora. And it's kind of mind-blowing when you're there in theaters. You're also in 3D, which I feel like would possibly ruin the textures for you, because it's a CGI filtered through three different types of polarized glass, or however that works. I don't know. 3D technology, I've only read about it in a limited fashion, and it's so interesting how it just visually looks so good in 3D. It's almost like James Cameron thinks about this stuff. But okay, let's really get into the nitty-gritty of the story now. We've talked about the similarities and how the story for Fire and Ash, I think there's grand stretches where there's really fun, new, exciting things being introduced, but there's also stretches that feel like almost deleted scenes from The Way of Water, or I guess it's more fair to say maybe even identical scenes with one or two newish elements, whether it's a guy with a metal arm, or whether it's kind of the same scene as the last film, but this time it's at night and there's one or two new dynamics added into it, whether it's the Ash people or whatever. Yes, it kind of a negative against the film, but I weirdly enough didn't care that much. One of my favorite Star Wars films growing up was Return of the Jedi. And if you haven't noticed, Return of the Jedi is kind of just a new hope for the third act in a lot of ways, with the whole trench run destroying a new Death Star that they've built. So I'm no stranger to the third film of a trilogy kind of borrowing from the previous ones or being a little bit repetitive of the previous ones. When I was a kid, I loved Return of the Jedi. It's not one of my favorite Star Wars movies now. I think obviously Empire and A New Hope and Rogue One and all these others, there's a lot of other ones that have grown on me, but this is not about Star Wars as much as I do think the Avatar films feel like Star Wars because George Lucas was such a huge idol for James Cameron. I was listening to a really interesting interview with James Cameron where he talked about the moment that he wanted to become a filmmaker was seeing Star Wars and how big of a deal that was and how much he really he loved Star Wars when it came out and the whole space opera element of it. And it's really fun to see that James Cameron, you know, he's a movie fan like the rest of us, and this film is doing a lot of really classic like 70s and 80s sequel things where you're borrowing from the previous film or kind of repeating new things. I mean, the weird comparison, but I just watched Home Alone 2, which is almost identical to Home Alone 1, but it just happens to be in New York. And guess what? I almost love Home Alone 2 a little bit more. But as for Fire and Ash, I thought the character arcs worked really well in this film. This film has my favorite character arcs of the series, maybe because it's coming at the end and we're getting things actually wrapped up, but as much as there is sort of repetitive story beats or set pieces, I guess you could say, or a story path as The Way of Water, I thought the character arcs are completely different this film, and they're really closing so many loops. I mean, we have Neytiri, who is grieving and sort of leading herself down a road of hatred, and that she hates humans so much, despite her husband being, you know, a human on the inside, her kids technically being part human as they are avatar mixtures or whatever you want to say, but she calls them pink skins and is just leading herself down a road of hate, which is dangerous because we're getting this mirroring with Varang and Quaritch, who are supposed to mirror Jake Sully and Neytiri in the first film, but what if they were unified as a couple based on hate instead of love and curiosity about the world? Very, very, I don't know, lovely mirroring storytelling. Again, kind of borrowing or being reflective of the things that have come before it. And then we have Loak and Jake, who Loak is the son of Jake Sully that survived The Way of Water, and they're kind of more distanced than ever because of the passing of Loak's brother and Jake's other son, and they're kind of blaming each other. Loak, I think, is also blaming himself a little bit more, whereas Jake Sully is really blaming his son for his brother's death. It works really well how that relationship and how that whole storyline plays out. But Spider, who I wasn't a huge fan of Spider in The Way of Water, I thought a lot of the story beats were really stiff with him. Gotta say, he's one of my favorite parts of this movie. I love what they're doing with him, and he's a very, very important part of this movie that I don't want to talk about too in depth because there's something major that happens with a lot of characters, and it involves Spider, of course, because he's a major character. We'll talk about it in spoilers. That being said, the story, I mean, it feels like we're a little bit scattered at times when it comes to character beats and story beats, especially approaching the third act. There's this huge thing happening on one side, and then we're flipping back where it feels like the other characters are actually way behind the other storyline. Like story A and story B are not at the same intensity. It feels like story B is still playing catch up or still in the kind of developmental phases, but Fire and Ash is kind of combining the previous two films really well, and there's characters from both films, there's story elements from both films, all concluding in one natural, organic feeling movie, even if it is all the bits that were kind of left over from The Way of Water. And I think it's actually improving on The Way of Water in some ways. I would say the action, probably the best in the series in this film for me. I thought all of the Ash people introduce a really exciting part into the action with their new types of weapons, as well as them being interested in guns and the human weapons, and then teaming up with Quaritch and his guys, or the humans in some ways. So I think we're reaching the peak of our action in this series in the third film, which is really good that we're going out on such a high, because the sky fights, the more vicious enemies, and some wild hand-to-hand combat really, really sells it in the final film. And there's actually more romance in this film. Maybe the most romance we've had since the first film, I would say. I mean, the second film, The Way of Water, there is a little bit of like hinting at relationships, but there's a lot of payoff in the romance. I don't just mean Quaritch and Varang, who have a batshit crazy relationship. There's this hilarious tweet going around that I shared on my Instagram. It's like MAGA dudes and their Filipino wives, and it's Quaritch showing Varang how to fire a gun. Fucking hilarious, and it's absolutely true. But I actually really enjoyed the romantic beats of this story, and James Cameron's best written romance, obviously, since the first Avatar film, where I love Neytiri and Jake's storyline. It's amazing how in love they are, but here it was really sold to me, and I thought it worked super well. And last week we talked about the themes of the first two films, and I've really enjoyed seeing the thematic progression of this franchise. The first movie, very much just a straight up Dances with Wolves colonization story where it's, white people or sky people versus Avatar. Jake Sully becomes one of them. Then you have The Way of Water, which is much more about the actual dynamics between the different Na'vi tribes as well as the other humans becoming avatars. And it's still a little bit of colonization. Of course, it's hard to get away from that theme in this franchise, but I love the refugee story that we're getting in The Way of Water, whereas this story is way more about grief. The Sully family is grieving over the death of Netta Yam, and then you have guilt over the death of a loved one. As I said, Loak is blaming himself. Jake in some ways blames Loak. Neytiri blames Spider, and that's why there's so much hatred in Neytiri's soul in this film. But there's also kind of mental health and suicidal thoughts. I won't say who, but there's some really dark moments in this film where people are kind of spiraling, and there's also a big thematic pull of crisis of faith. I mean, Neytiri says towards the start of the film that she's never felt so distant from her faith. She's never felt so distant from the forest. And even Kiri is frustrated by being blocked out by Eywa. And I really loved the sort of reconnection with faith and finding yourself when you feel like you are losing yourself in a faith point of view. And also it's exploring life from a place of hate instead of love. Like I said, the mirroring relationships as well as the Ash people. What's so interesting about the Ash people is they are not religious. They are not like the rest of the Na'vi who are with Eywa. They have felt like they've been rejected by Eywa because they feel like they suffered great loss and Eywa was not there to save them. So they've actually rejected religion now and they've moved on from Eywa. So it's a really fun sort of comparison between a tribe that has lost God, leads with hate, and is so connected to the humans and is mirroring the relationships of the first film. And then we have our classic characters from the first two movies who are trying to reconnect with religion, and it's a fun mirroring going on there. But I think there's a real issue in our world of maybe people not taking stories like Avatar seriously because of how they look when they're actually such thematically rich tales. I think animation in general has that issue where people are like, oh, they're just cartoons, like how serious can they be? These movies are touching on very real things that we all deal with, and it's like people can't connect with them because of the method that they're presented in, whether it's animation or motion capture. The Lord of the Rings has tons of motion capture and people still connect with those stories, but it's so interesting how some people are almost willfully ignorant or unwilling to kind of let their guard down to new forms of storytelling. I also do want to make a point to highlight Simon Franglen's score, which was absolutely sensational in this movie. Maybe it's my favorite of the three. There's multiple moments where the music is building so intensely and then it'll cut out and it's just a little bit of like a little bit of a horn, and I was just getting so lost in it, especially in the IMAX surround sound. I thought the score was playing so beautifully. And of course, I can't talk about Avatar without talking about the dialogue, because I had been so nitpicky over the first two films, rightfully so, I would say, where the first two films, the dialogue is very stiff. It can be very wooden and unhuman, and there is a little bit of that here. But like I said before, a major issue, I guess you could listen to the dialogue in isolation and not within the context of the story, the experience of watching this film, didn't bother me at all. Obviously, there's still issues with how all the teenagers talk, and it feels very old man writing teenager, but I was so emotionally tied into Fire and Ash, and I was so invested in what was happening that couldn't care less. There's tons of issues in this movie. Of course, I would say it's the most flawed of the three movies, but I weirdly just didn't care because of how invested I was. But my 2 stars and wish for Avatar, Fire and Ash. Star number 1, this is a great finale to a historic and sensational trilogy that we have seen progress over the last 20 years or whatever it is. The culmination of the greater part of James Cameron's career coming to an end. Star number 2, the action is insane. I think it's easily the best action in the franchise. My wish, I just wish for more of a divergence from the previous 2 films, or especially The Way of Water. I think there's a lot of room where you could have differentiated. But what now? Do we get more Avatar? Well, it looks like James Cameron is kind of moving on from Avatar. He did say, I've got other stories to tell. I'm not saying I'm going to step away as a director, but I'm going to pull back from being as hands-on with every tiny aspect of the process. I look at other people my age and it's like they're just punching a clock, waiting to go. I have ideas for more than I could ever act on in a lifetime. I got shit to do. So I think he's not closing the door entirely on Avatar 4. It is happening. 4 and 5 are happening, but we'll see how involved James Cameron is. But look, overall, I had so much fun with Avatar Fire and Ash. I want to see it again. I thought it worked so well for me despite so many flaws that could have been weighing down this film. I think it is a very, very flawed movie, but it's hard not to get lost in the sauce. I am giving Avatar Fire and Ash a 4 out of 5 stars. Really solid. Enjoyed it a lot. Let's get into spoilers. All right, spoilers for Avatar Fire and Ash, you have been warned. So I was expecting Jake Sully to die in this film, or Spider possibly, but no one really dies in the end for the good guys in the Sully family. It's only Kate Winslet and one of her sons that dies in the end, and it kind of surprised me. I was surprised how Big Jim didn't really go out swinging by killing everybody. He sort of was a little more subdued, and even at the start, Neytiri takes an arrow through the chest and she's emotionally and physically wounded. I thought for a second, holy shit, is this going to be it for Neytiri? Are they going to kill her early in the film and it's like a revenge story for Jake Sully's wife and the mother of his children? That would have been crazy, but no. That being said, I think maybe the expectation that someone major is going to die really helped my enjoyment of this film, because I was like, ooh, every moment is so filled with tension because it's a final film. Are they going to do it? Are they going to kill somebody? Are they going to knock someone major off like a spider? It would be kind of crazy. But let's talk about Neytiri in this film. So she's emotionally wounded, of course, because she lost her son in the previous film, and then she's physically wounded. And I really loved her connection with her bow that is from her homeland, of course, from her home tribe in the forest, and that was snapped in the previous film. At the start of this film, her kids find it and they decide, we can't let her see it. As Jake says, don't let your mother see that, so they bury it. That's when we get this crisis of faith, and Neytiri saying, I've never felt so distant from the forest. She loses that first battle. She's even wounded by using another bow, and I loved the sort of plot introduction, or the sort of Chekhov's gun, or whatever you want to call it, of the bow at the start of the film. And then finally, the way she gains her strength back is by training and training and training, and then it's suddenly easier when she has her bow at the end of the film. I thought it was just a beautiful character arc for Neytiri in this film, and one of my major complaints last week in my episode was how Neytiri is often sidelined, especially in The Way of Water. I find her particularly sidelined, but in this film, she is so involved. She's at the heart of a lot of the action and a lot of the big character moments. One of the major moments in this film is when she thinks they should kill Spider, or they should give up Spider and he should go away, but half of that is actually coming from hate. There's a major character moment where she's talking with Jake Sully at the water people's camp where they're living, and she says, like, I hate humans, I don't want anything to do with humans. Jake Sully has to kind of talk her down the ledge and be like, so you hate me, you hate our children who are half human, you hate Spider, like, what's going on? You can't lead with hatred, and hatred is blinding you. And she shares more in common with Varang, who is like basically a mirror held up to herself. I loved all that stuff. Then we have Loak and is it Pakatan, you know, the Tukum creature that has been outcast by their own tribe, and I really love the reflection in the two of their juries, how their own tribe has kind of outcast them because Jake Sully has blamed Loak for the death of his brother. And by the end of the film, they both kind of get to prove themselves, or they finally get to speak out and speak for themselves. It's just a really gorgeous character moment that I think James Cameron does a really good job growing over the course of 2 films, not just this movie. And Jake Sully, what can I say? I said this is my favorite Sam Worthington performance, and that's because he's not a stepdad in this movie. He's the dad that stepped up. I love his relationship with Spider, how Spider plays into their family. Like, obviously the kids really accept Spider, and there's so much shit going down with Spider in this film. We'll talk about it in a second, but Neytiri is convinced, like I said, that they should just kill Spider because everyone is after Spider. And there is a brief moment, there's a scene where there's a huge buildup. They land after escaping the Ash people, escaping prison with Spider, which I love that sequence so much when Spider breaks them out along with Dr. Ian Garvin or whatever his name is, played by Jermaine Clement, who I love. I thought it was fun that he got a little bit more involvement in this film as an action hero. But Jake Sully is fully convinced, yes, we need to kill Spider, and he tells Neytiri that, and that's only when she sees the light that this is not how this should go down. Why are we doing, a son for a son in many ways, like we just had in the previous film? But I loved that scene with Neytiri and Jake Sully almost killing Spider. It really was making me quite choked up, and the tension with the score building up so well. Spider catches on very quickly with what's happening once Jake walks him into the forest, and he can barely make eye contact with Jake, and Jake can barely look at him, and he makes him look away. And it's the kind of first time I think that he's calling him dad, and it broke my heart. I could not believe it, but I was so happy that Jake pulled out of it. Neytiri came to her senses, and they decide we need to protect him. He's like one of our own. My God, like James Cameron, that's some of the best writing he's done in the 3 films, because that was one of the most powerful scenes by far. I actually really enjoyed as well the moments where Quaritch and Jake Sully have to work together for the sake of Spider and the kids and escaping from the Ash people, and these moments where even in the 3rd act, when it's this huge swing for the sake of Spider, Quaritch has to grab Jake Sully's hand, and it's this beautiful moment where it's like, well, this is awkward, and it's because they both do care about him as their son. And it is, again, a film about co-parenting. I didn't really talk about it in the themes, but this is very much a movie about co-parenting and adoption, and just kind of struggling that balance between your two families like Spider has. And Spider is not just a connector in the family sense of this film, but Kiri is now able to connect with Pandora and even protected Spider in the weird webbing that we see in the previous films, and he's able to breathe Pandora's air. And that's what's driving this film forward, is that he can breathe that air. And I really liked that character progression, because it's now Spider is not just an adopted child. He's not just important for this story in an emotional sense for Jake Sully versus Quaritch. He's actually very important for humans versus the Na'vi and the Avatars. And I really, really, really thought that was great writing. As one story, it would have been really interesting, The Way of Water and Fire and Ash as one, but I like kind of the 2 film progression of Spider as a character, where in the previous movie, he's stuck with Quaritch and his avatars trying to find the other Na'vi, and he has to break away, versus in this movie, he gets to be the hero, breaking Jake Sully out, protecting his father and his family, showing he cares, and there's just a great evolution of his character that works really well, as well as his romance with Kiri. They have their first kiss. I thought that was a really sweet moment, even if it is a 70-something-year-old woman acting like a teenager kissing another young man. But one thing I will say, we actually do kind of get an answer of what happened to Earth. It seems like all the resources have dried up and everyone's in famine or something like that. It was a super, super quick line of dialogue where I think it's Dr. Ian is talking to the rest of the Tukum hunters and says, like, what are we going to hunt down this entire planet, blah, 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 and transform it like they did on Earth? Or is it Jake Sully? I can't remember, but that's one thing on definitely a rewatch. When I do see this for a second time, I want to pay attention to that, because one thing I've always been interested in within the Avatar films is what happened to Earth. But let's get back to sort of the bigger things. So Quaritch and Varang, they had a tent lovemaking scene, or like a LSD Pandora cocaine scene pretty much, where Quaritch is hallucinating and Varang is seeing into his soul. The editors of the film wanted to cut that, and then James Cameron said, unless you want to be unemployed, leave it in the film. So absolutely baller. I love how much creative freedom James Cameron actually gets with these films. Like, that's my favorite thing. But it's interesting how in the end we get this giant sky fight scene with Quaritch versus Jake Sully, hand-to-hand combat. Spider almost falls off, and then it's just the 2 of them, and Quaritch just sacrifices himself. He jumps for the sake of Spider, and is he really dead? I don't know. Maybe his avatar flying thing caught him throughout the fire. I think he's actually dead. But as much as this is a conclusion to these films, I guess you could say, it felt very open-ended. Like, all the Sullys live happily ever after, kinda. We lost Kate Winslet, and she just gave birth to her baby, which now the rest of the tribe is taking care of. Varang survives, I guess, right? She doesn't die. So there's a lot of open-endedness to this film, and there's a lot of avenues they could actually still go with the story. I mean, a lot of the corporate humans, or whatever, the RDA or RDS or whatever they are, they died, but there's still lots of room to explore on Pandora. There's still lots of avenues to go down. I was surprised they didn't kill off any of the major characters. They only killed Kate Winslet and one of her children, but not any of the Sullys, because they killed Neytama or Neytami in the last film, the other Sully son. So it's a pretty batshit insane movie. I think that's all I really have to talk about in spoilers. I loved Spider's involvement in this story. I love the importance of Neytiri's beau, Jake Sully, forgiving his son and in fact sort of respecting him more, saying these types of things happen in battle and it was my fault for, training you guys into this in a lot of ways, I guess you could say. But Avatar Fire and Ash, beautiful story, beautiful trilogy. I'm actually a bit of more of an Avatar fan now, I would say. After this Watch or Watchback series and Fire and Ash, I would consider myself someone that's a fan of the Avatar series. But now let's move into what else I watched. What else I watched? Well, I have 1 comic book, 3 TV shows, and 6 movies to talk about. I hope you're ready for Christmas movies because that's mostly what I watched. But let's start with the comic book. Secret Invasion, Captain Britain, and the MI-13. I will have another comics collection read through on my social media. I have a few Secret Invasion tie-in books that I've got on like Facebook Marketplace, as well as the actual Secret Invasion final comic, I guess you could say, or the collection of the actual culmination of the story. So this one was fun. I know who Captain Britain is. I've seen Captain Britain's stories and the character in other mediums, as well as the Black Knight, who is actually Kit Harington in the MCU, even though they never followed along with that. And I feel like we will see Captain Britain in Avengers Doomsday or something like that. But I really like this book, Captain Britain and MI-13. So it's basically this story where the Skrulls are trying to invade Britain and Captain Britain has to protect it along with the other Knights of the Round Table, or whatever you want to call it, the Green Knight, the Black Knight, Spitfire, Dr. Phasa. It was a lot of fun. It's only a 4-issue storyline, and then there's 2 classic Captain Britain stories at the end, which I haven't read yet, but I read the first 4 as its own inclusive story, and I didn't know that, Captain Britain's gonna die. It's all up to Pete Wisdom to let out this evil Merlin character, or the evil of Avalon, and he has to save the day along with them. If you haven't read any Captain Britain stories, I would recommend it. It was super fun. I had an absolute blast reading it, and artwork is really good. It's that classic phase of Marvel during the Secret Invasion run. It's a good enough story on its own if you just want to read that, or if you do want to read all of the tie-ins to Secret Invasion. Definitely Captain Britain's one that you could skip because there's not that much tie-in with the overall story, but it's still a really fun inclusion that I think you should check out. But let's move into TV shows, because the Batman Season 1 episode 25 and 26 plus Season 2 episode 1 and 2, although those numbers are wrong because I was Googling and I was on IMDb looking at the cast page and I noticed, there's 5 seasons when Amazon Prime says there's 4. So I'm actually on Season 3 of the show right now, where they've introduced Batgirl. It was fun seeing her origins, actually, which was the start of Season 3, and we haven't had a Robin yet. I didn't know Batgirl was introduced before Robin in this show, but still, that was a weird fact because I was like, Jesus, it's 26 episodes in the first season, but then the other 3 seasons are 13 episodes. That doesn't make sense. So Amazon, what's going on, man? Why are you organizing it like this? And I did notice when I was watching Batman, the animated series earlier this year, that some of the episode orders were messed up, I think, or I don't know, maybe because like Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers and the old cartoon channels or whatever had it in weird orders, and there would be reruns, and then that would count as an episode sometimes, or by mistake. I don't know what it was, but still, the Batman, I'm going to keep working my way through it and just churning out episode after episode. It was very fun seeing Batgirl's origins, as well as the introduction of James Gordon at the end of Season 2, I guess you could say, which is Season 1 for me. But also I watched Pluribus episode 7, The Gap, which finally we see Menuso, the Paraguayan man, making the journey to Carol, and I saw a spoiler for next week's episode that he makes it there, as well as Sosha is back, so that sucks because Reddit ruined it for me. But the finale is actually coming out on Christmas Eve, so I'm 100% gonna watch that. Next Monday I'll have an episode, of course, but I'm really enjoying Pluribus. I think it's been a crazy adventure of a season. It's flown by super quickly, as well as we've been learning about the hive mind. Carol is really sort of connecting with Menusa as well, and getting through to him that he needs to come to America. It worked because he's finally making the journey, and I thought his journey, the whole montage, was absolutely phenomenal. It was one of my favorite elements we've had so far in the show. Him constantly saying over and over again what his name is, that he's not one of them, he wants to help her and he wants to stop this, was like really beautiful and how motivated he was. And it's just, I love when we get really motivated characters for good reasons in TV shows. Well written, well balanced, gorgeously shot show. But let's talk about Survivor season 49, episode 13, which was the finale. Savannah wins, and I can't believe I finally had a winner pick come true in the new era for the first time in a while. I think maybe my first time in the new era, actually, my winner pick came true, but I think it was very clear from the start of the season, and the fact that we knew she was going to be on season 50 with Rizzo, which is now confirmed. That's a public thing. But as for the finale itself, Christina with one of the most old school questions at Final Tribal Council, can you name a loved one of everybody? That is something you would have seen in like Survivor Gabon a very long time ago, that it was way more about the social connections and getting to know each other and surviving on the island rather than game moves or like advantages and how did you use your vote, blah, 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 and all that stuff. So as much as people found that question to be like pretty diabolical and evil, I really appreciated it because it was a very old school question to ask. I could see Corinne or someone like that on Survivor asking this question, or even Jerry maybe, or Tina on Blood versus Water. You know, it was fun. But as for, you know, the rest of the finale, I wasn't surprised Christina went home 5th when they realized like, oh, she's good at fire, don't even let her get to 4. Sage making the finale did surprise me, but I will say good for Sophie pinning Savannah and Rizzo against each other in fire, because she had to make a move eventually. I feel like Final Tribal, it was represented pretty well on television. If anything, they definitely respected Sophie's game a little bit more, and they didn't show how harsh the tribe was on Sage. That's what everyone has indicated, is that the jury was absolutely pissed at Sage, and they pretty much blamed her for the majority being blown up at 7. And a lot of them, I think they feel like they lost because of Sage. So it's going to be really interesting to see, I don't know, Sage's, how she talks about the show. I mean, it feels like she does not want to ever be on it again. She said she even found it boring, which I find like she's just saying that probably to make the pain dull a little bit, that she didn't do so well. I mean, she got 1 vote from Jawan, but at the same time, half the jury was blaming her. So that's all I have for TV right now. I was sad Rizzo lost in fire, although I was happy Savannah won because she was my winner pick. Should we talk about some movies? Let's talk about them, starting with The Muppet Christmas Carol from 1992 with Sir Michael Caine. Is it Sir Michael Caine? No, I think it's just Michael Caine, right? He hasn't been knighted? I don't think so. But anyways, I've never seen it before. I was very excited to watch a new Christmas movie. So we were playing Catan. We were hanging out at my brother's place, and I was like, can I throw on a Christmas movie in the background while we're playing? And I'm happy I did, because I was so locked in. Hilarious. I want more Muppets movies in general. I know we're getting the new Muppets show in March with Sabrina Carpenter. I know it's produced by Seth Rogen, but we need a Knives Out movie with the Muppets right away, because Benoit Blanc would go so well with the Muppets, and I think it'd be fantastic for the 4th Knives Out movie, which I've seen some people, some of my Letterboxd mutuals, some of my own friends and family watching Knives Out Wake Up Dead Man on Netflix. That's awesome. I'm so happy they did. I actually got locked out of my Netflix this week, so now we're using my girlfriend's. I was going to watch Jay Kelly and do a review on Thursday for social media. Didn't happen. Maybe another time. But The Muppet Christmas Carol was really good. I love Kermit being Bob at the shop with Scrooge, and it's so much fun. If you want a hilarious, lighthearted Christmas story that, you know, the originals are pretty hardcore. It was funny actually when my brother turned to me while we were watching. He's like, can I say something? When we were younger, I found the Christmas Carol, or A Christmas Carol in general, really scary. And I was like, dude, me too. I actually find A Christmas Carol very scary in general, and they're scary stories. And even that one has a little bit of a chilled air to it, or a scary aura to it, but it was so much fun. I gave it 4.5 stars. And then my girlfriend and I, we watched How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the 1966 animated version. I really love that one. I try to watch it every year at least, because it's just a classic cartoon. Only 26 minutes. You can watch it for free on YouTube in 5 parts or whatever it is. So, you know, if you have YouTube Premium with no ads, you can just watch it in one shot without any commercials, and it's great. It used to be on Amazon Prime. I guess it's not now, but I love the voiceover. I love the animation so much. I hate that the Who's are hairy in it. It's kind of scary that they're hairy. No rhyme intended. Oh my God. It's a Dr. Seuss story and I was rhyming, but it's a classic. We used to watch it in school on the last day all the time. I gave it 5 stars. Then we carried on to Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. I completely forgot about the Trump cameo. It's so funny that we got that, and I was like, oh my God. And it was like a jump scare. But I think I like Home Alone 2 better. It's kind of scary. It does the whole New York City thing so well. I love love the hotel staff, despite Rob Schneider being in the film, so double jump scare. But I also like the family, how bad they feel and like, oh shit, we did it again. I still think they're kind of shitty to Kevin, but you know, it is nice that they're at least acknowledging what they did last year to him. And the action set piece, or the whole Home Alone, you know, house defense thing at the end of the film, defending his uncle's renovated New York City apartment, was really fun. And I love how they're growing on all of the action set pieces or all the little intricacies of the last movie. So I love Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. I gave it 4 stars, equally as good as the first one, I would say. After that, I did watch a new Christmas movie that's on Amazon Prime called Oh What Fun. Has like Michelle Pfeiffer, Dominic Sessa, Chloe Grace Moretz. Kind of an insane cast, and it's a new original Christmas movie. I gotta say though, wasn't a fan. I actually thought it was pretty boring, and I don't like to call movies boring, but there's long stretches of the movie where there's really nothing happening, and they're all just kind of like sitting around, a little bit of a chit chat. It'll be like Jason Schwartzman's character trying to talk to Chloe Grace Moretz, and then it's the rest of them just going on their phone and kind of cluing in once in a while, or chipping in once in a while. But a surprisingly boring movie. I didn't really find it that funny. There's a 5-minute segment with Dominic Sessa and Havana Rose Liu, I think is her name. Their characters have a really cute dynamic, but other than that, kind of a stinker. I gave it 1.5 star. Then the only new film I saw in theaters this week, other than Avatar Fire and Ash, obviously, was Is This Thing On? Starring Will Arnett, Bradley Cooper, Laura Dern. It's directed by Bradley Cooper, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun little divorce tale talking about a couple that are separated, or it's almost a will they won't they. They're discovering why their marriage doesn't work and what they drive themselves crazy about and stuff like that, and what they've given up over the years during their marriage, and them having to sort of rekindle those things that they lost a long time ago. And I really enjoyed it. I saw it in like a pretty filled up theater, and it seemed like most people had a lot of fun. It was funny because before the movie, there was 2 old ladies sitting beside me, and one of them even sat in my seat, and I was like, oh, hey, I think I'm here. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, they were eating popcorn over there, so we moved. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem. So I moved over one seat because I knew nobody was going to be sitting beside me during the movie. But it was just funny that they moved because people were eating popcorn. And then the girls behind me were talking during the trailers, and the old lady who said the popcorn thing turned around and shushed them so loud. I was like, oh my God. And me and the dude beside me giggled a little bit because it was so hardcore. But look, Is This Thing On? I thought it was a lot of fun. It's cool that Bradley Cooper did a kind of quieter, more intimate film after Maestro and A Star Is Born. I gave it 4 stars. I'll talk about it more on my social media review next week, but it was really good. Let's round out the week with a definitive Christmas movie. I won't listen to anyone that says Die Hard is not a Christmas movie from 1988. God damn, was Bruce Willis a hunk or what? I loved it. Every time I've watched this movie, it's been on TV at Christmas time, and I always miss the opening scene where he's actually landing in the city and the guy sees his gun. So I was like, oh, I've never seen that part before, but I've seen the rest of the movie a million times. My girlfriend and I were just hanging out on Friday night, and she threw it on being like, oh yeah, I'm going to watch a little bit of it. We ended up just watching the entire thing because it's just so good. It's so entertaining. It's hilarious. I love the Christmas element. It's so hardcore, and the action is just so like punch in the gut. Really works. Also, Alan Rickman, R.I.P., God bless his soul. So good as Hans Gruber. I love him as a villain. There's so many iconic lines and one-liners. Hilarious. I love that James Cameron actually coincidentally this week said it's his favorite action movie. I think he said it's also his favorite Christmas movie, but yeah, it's just a banger. I gave it 4.5 stars. Next week, I'll be watching a ton of Christmas movies over the break, no doubt with my family when we're suffering in our food comas. But for now, that has been what else I watched. And in fact, I think that's going to do it for episode 99. Jesus, that's crazy to say out loud that it's episode 99. Avatar, Fire and Ash. I had a blast with the movie. I'm excited if we get another Avatar in, 10 years or whatever it might be, or a few years in 2031. Who knows? Lots of Christmas movies around the corner to watch as well. But as always, please rate and review the show. 5 stars wherever you get your great podcasts like Watcher of All Things, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Acast. We are, of course, course, an Acast produced show. If you're on Spotify right now, you can comment right underneath the episode in the comment section. What'd you think of Avatar Fire and Ash? What's your favorite holiday movie? What are you watching? What are you reading? All that stuff. Let me know. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit like, subscribe, and comment down below. All that good stuff. I want to hear from you. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can email me, watcherofallthings@gmail.com, and find me on social media. Instagram and Threads are just at watcherofallthings, and then the TikTok account is at watcher.of.all.things. I post on social media every single day. Go find all those links below, and you can check out the videos that I'm making, and follow my personal Letterboxd account, KikiJ70. That's KIKIJ70. Follow me on there. Drop a comment under one of my reviews that you found me through the show. I will follow you back. Let's build a little community. But next week, dream big. It is episode 100. I'm sorry I'm not really doing anything special for episode 100, but we're going to be talking about Marty Supreme. It might be a few hours late, possibly even a day late, coming out on the Tuesday instead, because I'm with my family. I am seeing it on the 27th. I'm going to sneak away from them. But for now, happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everyone. If you don't hear from me before Christmas, take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.